Hello and welcome to Trigger Point Research Setups. What I want to do today was go through some of the breaking down and breaking up opportunities that we're seeing, and these are just setups. These are not actually anything that is playing out right at this moment as an actual setup that is in effect. These are positions that we're looking at when it comes to the opportunity for them to break down or break up. And again, these are just on the watch list right now, and it's always good to keep a watch list. Very handy because you have times that you're looking to invest and you want to know, hey, what is it that I'm looking for and what should I be looking at? If you have a watch list there, well, you're way ahead of the game. So, for example, we split this up. You can see the screen right here. We split this up into the actual level of breaking downs on the left-hand side here and breaking ups. And these, again, are what we do provide for our subscribers of Trigger Point Research, and as well as the fact that if you're not a subscriber and you're on our mailing list, you'll get a couple of these a week. We do 2 of these a week. One is the breaking up and the breaking down, with some explanation and overview as well. Now, what I wanted to go through here very quickly is some of the charts on these, and we'll talk about that, and we'll see what's happening with these particular charts, and we'll also kind of explain some of the things that are going on. Now, let's take the first as an example of a really good reversal that happened here. And in this market, what we're finding is there are a lot of false breakouts and a lot of false breakdowns. Now, on the top chart, we have the daily, and on the bottom chart, we have the weekly view. And we can obviously make that a lot shorter or longer. And what we're really showing here is the focus on the volume at price. These are indicators that give us a really good view, an inside view, if you will, of where the buying pressure or the selling pressure is. And we're going to use this with a very plain chart in the background because we want any colors to cloud our judgment of what's going on here and come up with, hey, is this something that we should be looking at? Now, when we look at the first situation here, and I want to bring you to your first area to look at here, is that when we are looking at the actual level of breakdown, well, we saw that there was a significant amount of trend, and we can kind of bring it all the way from the level in September all the way down. And very clearly, if you just simply drew a line here and you just connected it, and you can see there was a pretty good downtrend there, and then that was broken, of course. Now, at the same time, when you look at this and you see, well, this did break down and there was very little volume. In fact, if we go out a little bit further, and we see there's really nothing that was supportive of this particular position. And in fact, if we look at a weekly now, we switch over and we say, okay, well, where on the weekly are we seeing things? Well, we can see at the same time that there really isn't anything below this. Well, miraculously, of course, we got a nice upgrade of this stock right when it was breaking down. So it kind of all of a sudden reversed. And these are things you have to watch in this market because analysts are looking to defend their positions, of course. And what they're looking to do is at all times make sure that they have their best interest at heart. And you have to be very careful of where your stop levels will be. So this was a setup that really didn't work out so well, and we wouldn't have called this as a place to actually get involved. Now take a look at Whitewater. Now this is interesting. This is a little bit of a newer company, and let's bring this up. This has been around for a year and a half or so. And when you're looking at this, what I really want you to focus on here is that you can see that the stock had a lot of consolidation. Now look on the daily here. This is what we're really going to look at. There was a very long consolidation period. Moved a little above, moved a little below, but really there was a very significant consolidation period that is now looking to break to the downside. And we can see that when we shift over to the weekly view and we look at the volume at price and the areas that have the greatest level of volume that was paid, we could really see that narrow down to about the 1950 through about the 1850 level. Now, what's important to understand here is that when you look even further, and we now take the next step, and we say, well, where is it going from there? You can see that there's really no volume all the way down to about 1750 here. So when we then again we use the longer time frames that are we respect, and we look at those before we look at the short-term time frames. Oftentimes, you can see also there's some decent support, and then there's really nothing down to about the 17 level here. We don't see that there's been a lot of activity, a lot of very significant support at those levels. So therefore, what we have to assume is that the trend that has now broken, if we do see a confirmation of a break below about, we'll call it 1860 that is a potential opportunity for a short. You have to keep a watch on this. Let's go through some of these. We'll kind of meander through some of these names, and we can see that the same situation is arising with Federated Investors, that it was in a very substantial downtrend, and from there what happened is there was a level of support that was in fact broken, right about the 27.20 level. And from there, we'll zoom in a little bit, and we can see that. You can see that there is very little volume, and when we look back and we see that, well, there really is nothing below, down to about 26. Now, it did try to move a bit lower, and the fact of the matter is when we kind of look at the weekly again, we can see that this range down to about 25 is really in play, and probably a little bit lower, maybe even about 24.50. So right now it's trading at about 26.91. This is in the play for a short position, but again, it is a couple of things that are showing us that there is some support. I'm going to zoom in on the weekly, and again, looking to respect the weekly, you can see that it bounced right off our level, what we call the altimeter. It bounced off right off of our level that has been set since June. So it's still in a consolidation phase by all accounts. And that's something that you have to look at very in terms of respectfully, and make sure that you don't violate the fact that, you know, there is some support here and it is being defended. And again, moving quickly through some of these, we'll back off this a little bit here. And we can see that NAV is very much so on a daily basis holding up. You know, one of the big things here is that we have to think that, well, there's a level for any particular stock that there's going to be some buying interest. And what is that level? And how do we figure out that level? And that buying interest or that selling interest can be revealed when we look at a chart and we really focus in on where the volume comes in on those buys. So again, we're looking at a daily here, and you can see that the stock price really respected pretty well the fact that over the last couple of weeks there has been a good amount of purchases right at 36.5 level. Now, it did try to break down a little bit on 9:30, but at the same time you have to realize, wait a minute, now it did try to break down here, okay, but then it really kind of gathered some steam. Now, what we have here is a extremely solid support level at 36, call it 36.50, and it really did bounce off of that very nicely right at the level on 9:30. So it didn't continue the breakdown, and the breakdown isn't that great here. It really needs to flush down below about 32.50 before we see any significant amount of opportunity here. And then on a weekly, again, we can see that it still has some decent support at about 34.94, or maybe 35, we'll call it. Nothing really to see here. It did try to look at breaking down on a weekly basis. Again, a lot of support. When you look over to the left on Portland General, it's in consolidation mode. There's not a lot of volume here. You can see how thin the lines are compared to on the top here, where you see that there's very thick lines that are going across on the histogram there, and that is indicative of a very high amount of volume that's playing in. When we look at these, we really want to find where that volume sweet spot is. All right, well, here was a breakdown that was very interesting, but it had a couple of characteristics that probably would not have been recognized as an area to see it as a breakdown, because there was some support. Now, again, when we look at the thickness or the density of exactly what our volume and price and time levels look like, when we look at the one radar here, and I'll highlight this for you. We look at this entire range and we see, okay, well, through here, really, there wasn't a lot of volume. There's all this lack of volume, in fact. We can see that there's a lack of volume here, there's a lack of volume here. And those you could find that, you will usually find that there will be a significant amount of speed that will pick up when a stock moves through those levels, either on the upside or the downside. So you can see that, well, hey, we had this nice uptrend that went on for some time, and then from there we saw that there was a break. Okay, so you can just draw a simple line there, of course. And the question, though, is how much of a downside is there? Well, right now it looks like somewhere about 17. That's not the straightest line, but it's about 17 is the level of downside support, and there's really nothing in between. When we look back, there's just, from here to here, there's, and in between there's really no volume to speak of. The only thing that we are finding is that there is some volume that it did bounce off of, as a matter of fact, in the session today. But if you do break there, while there is support down to about $16, a bit of support, there really is nothing below that. So if this thing starts to move down, I would say that about $12, I would look for a breakdown of below the 1650 level here. Now, Teradyne, an interesting look here, but there's a pretty big mass all the way from on the weekly. There's a gigantic mass area that is what I would consider a pretty good support level, and it would be very tough to get it out of there. This is a ginormous consolidation that's going on right now. And with that in mind, when we look at this consolidation, we have to realize that you're going to have players that have been buying and are going to look for those levels of either where the former low was or where there was significant volume. So this thing could probably drop very quickly down to, I would say, about 14 or so, if it does in fact come down, and that probably coincides really well on the daily with this level here is the next drop level, about 1528, and then like I said, down to about 14, which coincides very nicely with that low here. But there really isn't a lot of volume in between there, so there's a really big gap. Look at the level of the gap here. There's just nothing there. Nothing here. There's just no volume on any of our indications, and what that usually will mean is that this is very vulnerable. Now, Diamond Offshore did break down, but let's kind of bring this all the way to a really nice level here. We can actually put on some more. Let's do that. Let's put on some more levels of. Let's put on 10. This is 10 radar, so it's going to go backwards and over the time periods that we set. It's going to look at period over period, look backwards, 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 and come up with where the level of support, resistance, and what the volume is. So we're looking backwards here, and you can see that there really is not much going on all the way back here. And this is really, if you look at this, this could be a problem area all the way down to about 57. This is interesting. And in fact, when we look on the weekly, we can see the same kind of setup here. So we're looking at right about let's see, where's that? Yep, 57 on the weekly is the high volume node as well. So about 62 down to about 57 is your potential reward there. In terms of risk, what you want to do is, well, you'd put your stop out where? Well, above any of these levels if it does breach its resistance. So we could say that 64.89 or so would probably be a good level of resistance that if it does in fact breach, that we have to be very concerned about. Value click. Value click. Let's take a look. Click out on value click. Again, this is I mean, look at this. This is just very choppy and very ugly looking chart. I mean, it had that tremendous run up, then the drop down, you know, and then this is just a mess. There is something to say about if it does get above the 22 level, though. I mean, you can see a quick flush up to about 24, 25 potentially, and that's something to consider. But at the same time, I think that when you look at this, that there is also some downside. It's not as great right now as I see it, because if you're looking at this, we do see a big massive volume right in the center of the weekly here, and it is in a very significant consolidation. You'll notice that there was a consolidation previously. Look at this right here. Let's take a look at this. Look at this consolidation right here, and we did mark that pretty well. And then it did do what usually happens after a consolidation. You get one of two things that happen. You either get the continuation of a consolidation or you get a vertical move. It could be on the upside or the downside. Now, in this circumstance, obviously, it clearly went to the downside. But usually you're going to see this time and time again. You're going to see this consolidation into a vertical move, consolidation horizontally into a vertical move, up or down. The question is, can you catch it? And when you're looking at some of these indications and indicators, that's what we're trying to do. We'll speed this up a little bit here. Cadence, you know, there's some good opportunity on the downside here potentially, but I think that there is some levels of support that you have to watch. Probably about 1259 is the level what you get to. The finish line had a nice move, and that was based on probably on the Nike numbers that came out last week or so, and it did gap up very nicely. They had some earnings as well, and you can see that it gapped up really nicely. There's a big hole right there, and when you look at those kind of situations where you see that there's a nice flat top here, see the flat top, you could draw a line across all of our levels. Well, from there you're going to see one or two things happen. After you see consolidation, the potential for a break is pretty high. So this is something we stay away from. Legg Mason, again, in a consolidation phase right now. And again, just simply when you look at these kind of charts where we have the altimeter and the radar on there, you can see that, you know, you have these consolidations. And where's it going next, right? We see a consolidation in between on the volume, Question is, where's it going next? So these are the things you need to keep in mind and figure out where we're going to actually go at the next level here. So, I think that the important thing to look at is how these are playing. Continental, nothing going on there. I mean, this was a potential breakdown and just flew away. This is why you have these setups that are going. GM does look like it has some downside potential. Where to? Well, I would say that if we kind of look at across the left, we look where the high volume node is, which is indicated by yellow. You see that? I'll give a little pointer to that for you. See the yellow inside of the radar right there? As a high volume node, and actually it coexists with a significant amount of support or resistance, depending on how you look at this, on the altimeter. Now, what's interesting to note about this is there is a very wide area here. This is saying that there's a lot of volatility potential, and then we start seeing much more constrained, and it's getting wider again. And this is in an uptrend because we do see that our lowest point of support is moving higher each and every time. But at the same time, again, we do have a pretty wide area that is building here as compared to some of the other ones. We see that the downside potential is about 33. It's about 8%. So when we look at this and we figure out, hey, where is that level of support resistance? Well, we could say, hey, you know what? If it does pass below here, you're probably going to see the potential for a move down to about 26. There's really no support in this whole region right here. A lot of arrows there. All right, let's get to some of the breaking ups. And you can see that this one is actively looking like it could actually break up. This RPC. Now, these are where we're finding a very high level of short interest, for example. We're also seeing that there is a earnings release that is far enough out that we're not really concerned about what's happening, but at the same time, it's close enough that there could be some short covering that comes into this. Now, if you look at this particular chart, you can see a couple of things. First of all, it's clearly in an uptrend. And secondly, I think the most important thing that you can look at here is that there is a combination of both an uptrend and the fact there's a lot of consolidation that happened on the daily and the weekly, and it's starting to break. And with that in mind, these are the kind of things that you look for in an opportunity to find where it's going to break to next. Now, again, you got to be careful with this and look very carefully at where is the resistance points, because if you go far back enough, and you can always find something, I guess, we have to look at that, and you can just see a simple double top going on right here. The question is, can it get above that level, about 1676? Now, this is something that is potentially out there to break up. I want to show you something. This is really interesting. This is LH, Laboratory Corp. Look at the length of this consolidation. This is really, on a daily basis, there's two things that we're seeing here. There's a very long consolidation, and it's very wide. That's a very wide level and layer of potential where it's going to see either a break one way or the other. And this is very little. You can see that moving back, it really screamed higher on very little volume, very little participation, but yet it held very nicely. It tried to drop down a few times in the area of July. So the question is, again, where is the next move? The thing you want to look at here, I think, is that how well it's held up along the 98 line or so. That could be put as a place of potential opportunity to the upside if you're going to initiate. And it's holding pretty well on that, and you have to see if that does. You can use that as a stop level, or somewhat below that, maybe about 99, moving forward. Again, these kind of things repeat themselves, right? We're seeing Volcano. What an interesting example, because right here you're seeing that a very clear and defined uptrend from a couple different perspectives. So we have the uptrend that we could just simply, if you wanted to, you could say, okay, let's connect some of the lows here and kind of just go something like that and say there's an uptrend there. But at the same time, what we're finding is that we see that our levels of support are constantly increasing. So that uptrend is also been confirmed, and that's a short term. That's since June, because obviously if you look on the weekly, we were in this tremendous downtrend for a while, and then it just broke and then just took off. And one of the reasons for that is there's a high level of short interest here, and that is something that we're looking for. Remember something, that short interest can be good for the buyers because you get a short squeeze and things can really move very significantly. So what I wanted to look at here was, okay, well, where can we go on Volcano? Okay, so Volcano, look at this. You got a nice big gap above looking left all the way up to about 24.87, and we're seeing that we also see about probably about a $25 right in this range here, $25 top end here. Well, that's a good return, but where does it go from there? That's the big issue. Okay, well, you have a lot of congestion in this area. So the problem is that there's upside here, but the upside may be somewhat limited. Ultra, ultra petroleum. So let's look at this now. I find this really interesting because if you look at this on a weekly basis, this thing has just been just a dog. It's not doing anything. I mean, it hasn't really moved outside of this range, right? From about 25, from about 20, excuse me, to about I don't know, 21 change. I mean, you got some highs and you got some lows and you got some movement there. And you got the same situation here. We got this consolidation and all. But let's take a look backwards here. Let's kind of, yeah, there we go. Let's look backwards here. Now, if you start trailing this back, we could see that, you start getting above this 22. This starts to be all of a sudden less and less and less and less resistance here. That coincides to about this 25 level. You get this thing moving past about 2470, 25. This thing could really take off. And especially the fact that there is a good amount of short interest on this, and the consolidation has been so great. Think of it like a springboard, or something that you've, maybe a rubber band, where you pull it, and then all of a sudden when it finally releases, when it finally kind of takes off, it really starts to move. That's kind of the idea here. That's the the basic philosophy of what we're dealing with, is that we're looking for those things that could really spring higher. And we can keep going through these. I'll just kind of pick a few that maybe look interesting. This one, New Park Resources. Again, I don't know this name. I don't know the fundamentals on this, but I can tell you that obviously it's been in a very nice uptrend through most of this year. And you can go back to probably November of last year. It's had some very, very significant upsides where it moves very quickly. Look at how this just blew out tremendously, then it consolidated. It's having consolidation again. It's hitting a top here, and if this thing blows, there is the real potential. There's nothing really to stop this thing from really screaming higher. Of course, I mean, obviously you have earnings that come out and a few other things. Here's a good example of something that I want to share with you. So we're in a bit of a downtrend here, and you can see that that's clearly defined again from just kind of looking like something like that. And then we got this break that moved up, and all of a sudden there was a big reversal, and then now we have consolidation, right? We have this consolidation right between the 1350 and about 1340. Now you can see this with or without the tools that we're using here, but essentially, what are you seeing? Well, on a weekly basis, this move down that we saw is really not on a lot of volume here. It's a good support at about 1250. Now, that's interesting. I would say that if you look at this and you see that there's a big consolidation and there's a big area of support with a lot of volume going on, so you got this wide range right there, about 1250 down to 1150, pretty big range, but nonetheless it still is a pretty good level of support there. You could probably initiate something at about the $12.50 level and look for a bounce opportunity on the upside and see that, hey, you know what, you have some upside opportunity here, because there's, when you get to the level of about 11s, 1150s. Let's kind of do two boxes here. There was no support. There's no support on the way down there, but there's really no resistance on the way back up when you look across. And let's take a look at Safeway. Well, that's clearly a very volatile stock. Moves pretty incredibly, and it is showing that if we kind of get in on this here, that if you look back, first of all, there was really no volume, on that major break. I mean, gaps all over the place. And we see the same thing on the weekly chart, these big gap ups. And now it's consolidating nicely. The question is, where's the next leg going to be? And with the short interest ratio that it has and where it is, the potential is for it to do one of those springboards that we talked about a moment ago. And then finally, Lorillard is something that, again, has been in a long-term consolidation. And when you look at that, I think you have to say, hey, wait a minute, what's happening here? And look at backwards, especially on a daily, that you have some decent support down to the highest level of the volume level within this range, and even going backwards, you have some decent support all the way down to about 44.70, and you can use this level 44.27 as a nice support level. So if you kind of want to think about initiating, maybe that this could be nice if there is a pullback in the market, and then look for an opportunity for this to ride up to about 46, 47. Anyway, that's a elongated version of what we talk about, and I wanted to kind of give you some of this stuff maybe giving you a little bit of a glossy-eyed feeling, but nonetheless, the fact of the matter is, when you look at the volume and you look at the price and you look at and combine this into a nice package where you can see exactly where the buying and selling is going on, I think this gives you a very good idea of where you want to set up your watch list and what to do with them then. Again, we do put these out twice a week. We put out the potential breaking down and the breaking ups. So you just get on the mailing list. We'll be happy to provide those. Until next time, thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.